Thank you for coming tonight. I will be your moderator. As Allison said, my name is Janine Annette. I'm a contributing writer to the Dispatch, and I'm the parent of an 8th grader in the Hastings School District. I'm going to spend about 40 minutes asking questions of our panelists, and then we'll spend the next 20 minutes on Q&A from the audience. We also have a few questions that were submitted in advance, so I'll try and read a few of those as well. I'm looking forward to a respectful and productive discussion about the proposed ban on cell phones in the schools. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists. So right next to me is Francis O'Shea. He has lived in the Rivertowns since 2014, and he is a real estate professional with a background in conservation real estate and residential brokerage, and he's the father of a 2nd and 5th grader in the Irvington School District. He has been concerned about screen use in the school since 2019 when he joined Heads Up Rivertowns, a volunteer committee committed to building a more screen-smart community. He is a volunteer with the Irvington Volunteer Fire Department and the co-chair of the Irvington Rocktoberfest Committee. And when he's not looking at or worrying about smartphones, he likes to golf and play music, and he lives in Irvington with his wife and 2 girls and their dog, Molly. Next to him is Monique Johnson. She is a licensed clinical social worker, certified school social worker, and certified health and wellness coach who specializes in evidence-based counseling practices. Monique is currently a school social worker at Ardsley High School, a position she has held for over 28 years. In addition, Monique has a private clinical practice. Next to Monique is Ken Slentz, and he is the superintendent in the Dobbs Ferry School District, where he has served since 2022. Mr. Slentz has been a New York State school superintendent since 2002 in various districts, and also spent 5 years as a senior administrator in the New York State Education Department, leading the Office of Pre-K to 12 Education. Mr. Slentz and his wife Katie have 1 daughter and 2 grandchildren. And last but not least is Frida Belasco, who is a senior at Hastings High School, where she is co-editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, The Buzzer, and she's co-president of Amnesty International Club and secretary of the Model UN team. She's also a chair of the executive board of Hastings Kids, a venture of Hastings Youth Council that connects teens to service opportunities, through which she co-founded her town's intergenerational club. Welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you for being here. So let me ask some questions of our panelists. So in the Rivertowns, the policies of all 4 school districts right now is no cell phones for K through 8, and no cell phones in the classrooms 9 through 12. How does that feel from the student's perspective? Does the experience match the policy in your experience?
Hi everyone. I'd like to mention that the policy at Hastings High School, and I can really only speak for myself because all students have vastly different opinions and experiences with this, but at Hastings High School the policy is that all phones have to go in pockets at the front of the classroom, and this is really regulated by the teachers themselves. And I also have some teachers who just use the honor system, where as long as they don't see you using it, they will not force you to put it up there. And I think that since that policy is in effect, there is a pretty not at all distracted learning environment, because even if students have their phones with them, they know that they can't take them out, or else they will be asked to put them in the pouches, and for the most part, no one's really using their phones in the classroom.
And let's talk for a moment about what does it look like, what does a good policy look like from everyone's perspective on how cell phones would exist in schools? And I'm gonna just have each of you answer that question.
I'm an advocate of a bell-to-bell no-cell policy, but the developmental importance of this time of life makes it critical, in my opinion, to remove these addictive phones from the school environment. So for me, it would be, you would get rid of your phone the moment you came in, and you wouldn't have it until after the last bell.
So for me, I feel like it's really important to say up front that I am here as a clinician and having a neutral stance. I think it's important for me to present the facts of what I actually see happening with students with the phone, or if the policy goes into place without it. This has been a topic we've talked about for many years. We're talking about it again now, and that means that we're all, we're not saying that this is complacent, but this is okay, and I think it's important. We need education no matter what, and it's not just in the school, but it's in the home as well. Whether we have it or we don't have it, we have work to do.
this is critical. Arguably, one of the most difficult discussions of our time. Our daughter is 25 years old. The regrets that I have as her superintendent for what we didn't do at the time that she was going through school, where the phones were just an ancillary thing. I look at her and her friends now, and I gotta tell you, some days I'm truly baffled. I don't understand this generation. There's so much drama involved. We have a lot of family conversations around this, and so fast forward now, as I'm watching my grandchildren live in an environment where there is always a screen within reach. And so the question is, what does a good policy look like? We don't know yet, because we have a role as an education institution to try to modify behavior to the benefit of our children. A ban is a blunt instrument. Our children walk off campus and they're right back on the phone. Our children walk off campus into the workplace, into the post-secondary environment, and they're on their phones. We feel we have an obligation to at least think deeply about how we leverage this as a moment of education in the first instance, and not as just a ban. You don't think the kids know how to beat the yonder pouch? Give them 30 seconds. Are we going to do cat and mouse, or are we going to take this critical opportunity to educate for self-control? And there's going to be exceptions to that. We'll have to deal with those exceptionally. But the good policy is one that reflects the deep thinking for us of our Board of Education, of our administrators, of our families, and our community.
Yeah, so kind of building off of what you said about using this as a learning moment to kind of provide these life skills, it's crucial that students really have their opinions heard, because when we feel like we have a say in the conversation, we are more likely to respect and to follow the policies that the administration creates for us. And we're really the ones that know what it's like to grow up with this technology. It's so new and it's constantly changing. We've grown up surrounded by technology our entire lives, and we understand its limitations, and we also understand its implications in a way that truly no other generation does. Many of these conversations and studies that talk about technology do not include student perspectives, and they really just focus on the numbers. They really ignore the nuances of what it means to really live with this technology in your daily life, and any effective policy will have to include student perspectives.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about what's working and not working about the current policies in our school district. So as we just mentioned, the proposal is for a bell-to-bell ban on phones in all the school districts, middle schools, high schools. What do we think is working about the current policies, and what do we think are the problems with the current policies?
I'll start with problems. In the Hastings High School, just from my experience, the teachers are really the ones that are made to enforce the policy, which puts unfair pressure on them, and it can create tension between students and teachers, which otherwise would not have been there. It's kind of this issue of when does a problem become a school issue, and when does it stay at home. I disagree with the bell-to-bell policy. I think that it's necessary that students are able to access their personal technology in between classes when it is not affecting their learning and affecting their participation in the classroom, just because we're so involved with things outside of school that require technology for communication and just for staying up to date on everything that's going on. And it's really impossible to do that if you don't have access to your phone. What's working with the current policy is that we're able to monitor things outside of school while being able to focus within the classroom setting.
So for us, we have been phasing in different versions of our procedures. Right now, K-8, there is a ban, if you will. There are exceptions to that. We had 2 cases today, for example. Students had their phones out of their lockers. Administration working with the parents, who were very collaborative, understanding that, yep, this is an issue. We will talk about addiction at some point, and we have students that this probably is true for. What we like about what's worked, if you will, so far, is the attention that it really is bringing to the issue. Watching how are our students interacting? Are they going to their locker? Do we see those dependencies? that's not an issue for discipline in the first response, right? That's an issue where we bring in the clinicians and the school counselors to say, okay, we have to change the behavior, and how are we going to go about doing that? I can tell you, having done this job for as long as I have and overseen 695 school districts across New York State, discipline doesn't work like we would like it to. Children will find their way around certain things. If our job as a learning institution is to really stay true to our mission, then what's working about this is that it's causing us all to think differently. How is this really impacting our kids in terms of the learning environment? There are inconsistencies across the schools, there's no question about that. We're better this year than we were last year. We'll be better next year than we are this year because of all of the adults working together.
Do we think that removing phones entirely from the schools will have an improvement on students' mental health, and do we think it might improve classroom performance?
So, I think I can speak to some of the concerns, some of the problems that I see currently with students with cell phones, right? I think that when we look at excessive use of cell phones, and again, this is not just in schools, we're talking about at home as well, especially centered around social media, we do see an increase in anxiety and depression. We also see lower self-esteem. We can think about cyberbullying, we can think about FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, social comparisons, and I have had students come to me talking about these concerns as well. We know that kids who are using their phones are not as attentive. They struggle with multitasking. It's not easy. We know that there's sleep deprivation, and that's happening at home, right? Not in the classroom. Sleep deprivation is going to add to more emotional vulnerability. We know that there are experience blockers, opportunities that kids are not taking advantage of because they're on their phones. No, I don't need to do that. I'm going to just game a little bit more, or I'm just going to be on social media or play this or that, or chat with someone. So how about the face-to-face, right? Social, we have concerns about that. Their ability to interact face-to-face with someone. We're not learning the social and emotional skills that we need to maintain interpersonal relationships. So there are definite disadvantages. And again, I think that's where it comes to education. We are mandated, right, to have media literacy and digital wellness in schools. Are we addressing cell phones? Are we talking about the fact that we are not actively participating in our lives? We're not living in the moment. Are we teaching them skills to be able to deal with this device that is completely controlling them? Do we need to help parents to be able to set those limits and boundaries at home as well? We could add things within the school system as well as at home. It's so much easier in elementary school and middle school, especially with recess, right? They are stimulated in a different way. They're engaged in a different way. And we don't really have that ability in high schools, right? Kids aren't going to go out and play outside. But we can give them those type of opportunities. And I'm very fortunate that my superintendent, who supported the reopening of our wellness center at Ardsley, that was an initiative we did to give them the opportunity to socialize, be kids, play board games, interact with each other. And I think we can bring that into schools more as well.
Yeah. I've smartened up and started listening to students a bit more about the whole thing. And well, there's so much to say here, so many good places we could stay for the rest of the evening, but I guess I would just say I'm going to let experts tell us all what we know, which is that these smartphones are highly addictive and are changing society. We simply don't know what it's going to do to our kids long term. We're living through an experiment, but it seems pretty evident that it's not good for mental health. It's not good for cognitive development or social development. There really is no pro-argument for social media and smartphone use by young children. The simple fact is that we've found ourselves in a place with absolutely no regulation at the local, state, or federal level for these huge tech companies that are learning how to affect our brain. With all that said, besides Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and all the other titans of Silicon Valley, I think the problem ultimately, to answer your earlier question, is parents. I think it's very unfair for us to say that it's the administration's job to eliminate smartphone use by our kids, right? I mean, as a local administrator said to me, if we don't figure this out before 8 a.m. and after 3 p.m., it really doesn't matter what we do at school, right? So I think that opportunities like this for us all to talk about it and learn how to actually come up with a solution that involves some face-to-face interactions and chats about what's challenging and what isn't is how we're going to get to the answer.
We just talked about sort of the negative effects of these devices, but as you touched on earlier, we've all come to rely on these devices so much for our everyday lives, and that includes students at the high school level. So do you want to talk about the argument in favor of allowing phones in between classes?
Yeah, so kind of just to touch on the previous point really quickly, I completely agree that social media and technology has detrimental mental health effects. Like, I felt them. I know many of my friends, if not all of my friends, have felt them. But this is where the nuance is often lost, because I think that most parents and most people who are involved in this conversation they're not in the school building at this time, and they don't know that during lunch and between classes, we're not just sitting there hunched over our phones scrolling TikTok. Most of these downsides of social media comes from spending hours in the dark just scrolling, and that's just not happening in school. You're engaged with your peers, you're having conversations, you're just walking between classes. So although social media does have downsides, many of those downsides are not being created, so to speak, within the school building. Most people will only check their phones, they won't just scroll. And I think that often people should give students credit. I mean, when I'm at dinner with my friends, we'll put all our phones out in the middle of the table because we understand the harmful effects of technology. Since we've been living with it our whole lives, we also understand ways to mitigate those effects. In terms of the benefits of having technology in between classes and during lunch, I kind of alluded to this before, but our lives are so interconnected through technology these days. This is kind of a struggle with the current educational system, but in order to get into college, you need to do so many extracurriculars, and you need to be involved in so many things outside of school, and all of those things are mediated through email, through texting, through other forms of online communication. And it's I can tell you, the time commitment is like a full-time job. It's impossible to do only outside of the school day, because taking into account those 3, 4, 5, 6 even extracurriculars, plus add on hours and hours of homework, that's a lot of time to spend doing things outside of school. So maybe I can answer a text from someone who's involved in extracurricular who goes to a different school, or maybe an adult even who's involved in extracurricular I can do between classes. That saves so much time, and it allows me to be involved in this world outside of school, because most high schoolers are not confined to that school ecosystem. And even within the school, my extracurriculars in the school rely on technology to stay in communication. In my bio, you mentioned I'm the editor of our school newspaper, and we have to send our paper into the publisher by 1 p.m. That's during the school day. In order to do that, we need to be texting and communicating and sending PDFs back and forth. And that requires phones to do. So I think that this bell-to-bell conversation really forgets that students are not only students, but we're also involved in so many other activities.
Frida, you said something before. You said you were taught something so early on, right? So it wasn't just about learning within the classroom. but it was your parents reinforcing and helping you learn skills to self-regulate. I think
Yeah.
that's key.
I mean, I wasn't allowed to have social media until I was 15, and I had a flip phone until I was 13. I can tell you a lot of my friends had regulations, and it's really, we've talked about like where's the line between home and school. Like it's constant communication. Schools need to be teaching this stuff too. You know, it's not just banning phones, but it's creating these conversations about what does it look like to have a healthy relationship with social media and with your phone.
And let me move into talking a little bit about the logistics of this proposal. I think from conversations that I've had with other parents, a lot of people are for it, a lot of people are against it. I think one of the stumbling blocks for people who don't support it is the money that is allocated as part of this proposed legislation. $13.5 million from New York State. Ken, do you want to maybe talk about this cost associated with this proposal?
Just rough numbers, $13.5 million works out to be half a cent per student in New York State. You're not going to buy a Yonder pouch for that for each kid. When you look at the reports, particularly out of larger districts, not only is the initial investment in pouches, lockers, or whatever, if you have something that's portable with a student, where districts have fallen short is neglecting to budget for the replacement of those, right? Because kids are figuring out how to hack them, and when they hack them, oftentimes the pin on the Yonder pouch, for example, broken, bent, etc. So there's a challenge.
Can you talk a little bit more about those pouches for those who don't know yet what they are?
Yeah, so there's a vendor community that's running wild with this right now, and they are seeing an opportunity, and most of their addresses end with .com, so we all know what that means. They are not out there for the support of children in mental health. They're out there to make a profit. Let's be honest about that. There are some products that are being pushed heavily. You go to any education conference, you are going to see two vendors in particular at every one, and they are pushing hard on this, which is where we're debating what does this look like? When we ask the students to put their phones away, what does that look like? And so we're having that debate. But the cost of this is very real. Now, $13.5 million is just, it's interesting, but it's so terribly insufficient. But in districts like ours in the Rivertown, we won't get that money. That will be how that's divided up, typically coming out of the state, is based on your district's wealth. Every one of the Rivertown districts in the eyes of New York State is considered very wealthy. We won't get that money, so that has to come from us. Now, we've had some proposals, very generous offers from foundation, from other contributions. Not every district is going to have that fortune, so that's money now on the taxpayers to support this. So we have, again, I go back to this notion of the blunt instrument. We ban, now we're going to put in lockers, or we're going to bring in these pouches as an additional cost, when virtually every school district in this area is facing what's called a structural deficit. The revenues are not keeping up with the expenditures, and so we're having to make choices on that. And those opportunity costs, if you will, are very real. So we're going to spend X number of thousands of dollars to store cell phones. That means we're giving up on something else. Every school rests within a community, and we all have a role and responsibility. So we're offsetting some of these potential costs with opportunities for the kids, so this is less of an issue for them.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask all of you, one other thing that's been discussed a lot is that some parents say that they feel that they want to be able to communicate with their children during the school day. And so some of the parents are, like I said, some people are for this and some people are against the bell-to-bell ban. And some of the parents who are against it say, well, we want to be able to communicate with our children, especially if there's an emergency. So how would you all, feel about that?
I'm fortunate that my daughter's never been involved in a school lockdown, so I'd like to start by saying I haven't experienced that, and so I can't honestly tell you how I would feel about having chosen to take a smartphone or other communication device out of my kids' hands in that eventuality. But I would point parents that have that concern to the public health experts that have proven that in fact distracted children and smartphone noises can lead to your children being more endangered in an emergency situation, not less. And I can understand the desire to reach out to your child, but I mean, without being too eloquent, are you willing to trade that feel-good moment for the hours and hours of exposure to negative mental and social development that we all understand to be true about phones? And I think you've very eloquently stated the usefulness of them. I think that it's true, of course, that you guys have to have buy-in, but you are children still. It's concomitant on us to step up a second and understand that, you know, this isn't our own private Idaho. Our own choices have effects on other kids, you know? And so, just to be clear, it is not helpful to have a smartphone during an emergency situation. Of course, these things are extraordinary. I'm a realtor. My entire life runs through this phone. I wouldn't be doing what I do if not for it. But the simple fact is that our kids aren't ready to handle that. And parents' convenience should not be a reason to keep smartphones in our kids' hands.
The key word was anxiety, right?
Yeah, we're all
And
very anxious.
there is a lot of fear with and without that.
Yep.
And I think that is something that we have to acknowledge and we're gonna have to address if the bell-to-bell goes in or if it doesn't, right? Because I think that we're gonna have a lot of anxious kids and parents when it happens.
I understand the anxiety issue. I'm a very anxious person myself, but I'm going to push back on the notion of anxiety and fear in these sort of extreme situations. Quite frankly, my impression, having listened to a lot of people, and speaking only from a parent's perspective, not about the administration or students, the core of this issue, the change, is really not going to be pedagogy. They are doing a great job of making sure our kids are focused, okay, as much as they can be in this world. Parents are used to being able to communicate with their children at all times, and they don't want to give it up. And it's not about emergencies, guys. It's about, what do you want for dinner? What happened to the grade on your test? Children are regularly being communicated to by their parents all hours of the day, starting in middle school. That is the reality. So if I would leave you with anything tonight, I would say, it's not about any of this stuff. It's about convenience and what we're used to.
In addition to just addressing the fact that anxiety is there,
Yeah.
I think we also have to look at the relationship that this phone has with the parent and the child. So often we do see that kids are jumping to the parent before they come to one of us. They're not learning to sort of advocate for themselves. A lot of the argument on the other side, right, is I want my child to learn how to self-regulate, and if they have a phone, then they'll know when to put it away. But we're doing just the opposite with the phone. We're not empowering them to develop their own skills. We're doing it, we're micromanaging their life all the time through the phone, and they've become so dependent on it. As a clinician and a parent, I have seen both sides, and I think that we all want the best for our kids, and we want them to be independent and learn to be able to think and function on their own. And we can see the phone getting in the way. So we have to acknowledge, when we said the word anxiety, that it's not just on the kid's part, but the parent's part. And I am worried about the other half, because your entire lives have surrounded around technology that I can't even imagine. I mean, we know as adults, like, to put it down, what are we gonna do for a day without it?
Right.
Let alone these kids who their entire world has functioned with this. Everything is on the phone. Certain professions, everything we do, like you said, you manage your schedule, it's all there. So we do have to teach these skills. Our kids need it.
Yeah, I mean, this first hit home for me, and it would have been 2009. My daughter was in 3rd grade taking the New York State test, and she said, "Dad, the strangest thing happened today in the middle of the test. This chirping noise kept coming out of a locker and in the classroom, and the teacher couldn't figure out what it was. It was Nick's mom texting him, wishing him good luck on the test on a flip phone, right?" And so that's when it really started for me that we are entering a fascinating phase here where, look, I look today at my wife and daughter. They communicate If they don't communicate 12 times a day, it's not at all. It's constant, right? That's their world. My daughter is a single mom with 2 young children. She can't easily pick up the phone and FaceTime. She's in motion the whole time, but she can text her mom very easily. So all of these, Frida said it eloquently, these nuances
Yes.
that we think about, if we put a ban in place, the first thing that's going to happen is the list of exceptions. We'll have parents asking for 504 plans because their child needs an accommodation to have their phone to be able to communicate home. This is just how it will go. This is a predictable cycle, right? And we'll have to manage that. And so, of course, we will if that's the direction that we choose to go in. But as I said before, I really want to give an homage of sorts to my teammates in that we're not just thinking about this as a policy issue. We've stepped back and said, let's not be pulled down the cell phone rabbit hole. I've asked the administrators, I want you and your teams to get together and look at how you use technology in general in your building and how you use it intentionally to improve the teaching and learning environment. If there's not a clear intention to it, we're not using it. We really have a lot of thinking to do as the adults in the room, including our senior students who are in fact the adults in the room, to think about how we can best leverage technology, taking full advantage of the best parts of it, and how do we then parse out the other pieces. That doesn't happen in a semester. It doesn't happen in a year. It is evolutionary because we have to continue to think deeply and take advantage of everyone's best thoughts in the room.
You said you had a question for Frida?
Yeah, I'm still having a hard time figuring out the positive case for, now I understand the logistical challenges, Ken. And Frida, I understand that there's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of agency that you have to have as students, right? You mentioned earlier the notion of necessity. And so my question is, the purpose of a ban to me is it's a simple policy, of course, until the 504s come in, and it's well said, Ken. Let me ask you this. It's not a rhetorical question. If a ban was in place such that extracurriculars could no longer rely on smartphones to communicate with children during the day, right, and young adults, do you think that would make it easier for you? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if we're asking why a ban, wouldn't that make it less necessary? You used the word necessary earlier. You need one of these, and I agree with you right now, you do. But wouldn't a ban make it easier, less necessary for you to have one of these things?
Technology is how we communicate. It's not simple. In fact, I liked what you said earlier about a gradual thing. That's kind of something I've been thinking about is if this bell-to-bell policy were to be put in place, it would have to be.
Yes.
It would have to be very gradual because just completely taking it away would throw off the entire school ecosystem.
Correct.
I mean, I have the numbers of my teachers. You know, I text with my teachers sometimes about things because that's just the way that our school works, you know, and that just throws off the way of communicating, that throws off the way that all organizations within the school are run. It just throws everything off, and it's a major shift.
Sure.
And I just think that the word that you use, simple, is not at all reflective of the way that the policy would, it could be a simple policy, but it would not be a simple solution.
Sure.
Because you talk about 504 plans, I can tell you we were going, or our school was going to ban personal computers in the beginning of the school year, and so many people emailed about having exceptions to it. I didn't email, but I considered emailing with an exception to it. I don't have a 504 plan, but as a senior, like, it messed up my college applications, it messed up my science research project. It's not a simple solution, and it's not a blanket policy, and it would need to be gradual and need to understand the nuances of every individual student.
Yes, I do want to thank everybody so much for coming tonight. If I didn't get to your questions,